In this video we're going to look at some simple troubleshooting using DHCP on two Linux machines, a Linux DHCP server and a Linux client desktop. Note that the troubleshooting technique is identical, although obviously the files and tools used will vary to troubleshooting on a Windows client and a Windows server. So first of all, let's just go through what we have. The computer here described as admin with the pinky ready background is the client, and that at the moment, if we have a look at the network connections, has a single network interface and it's configured to get an IP address automatically via DHCP. Now as it stands, for the purpose of demonstration, I've ensured that this does not have an IP address currently. How can I tell? Well, if I go to a terminal window and issue an ifconfig command, you'll notice that ETH1, the network interface, is currently not showing an IP version 4 address. This is what it would look like if it actually had one. It would have an address attached to it like that. So I currently don't have an address on this client. So if I was to now toggle back to the server, and the server is identified via this backdrop with the leaf on it, and it's called server, and I was to open up the terminal, and the server is running DHCP3, the DHCP3 daemon. I can prove this to you by doing /etc/init.d /DHCP3 server, and then issuing the status option for that. So this is, remember, the startup script that starts, stops, restarts, etc. the DHCP 3 server daemon in the background that's running on this computer, and status will tell me that this server is currently running. Now if I really wanted to, I could restart or stop this, but we're not going to bother doing that because it's already running there in the background. Now what's going to happen is I'm now going to go to the client in a moment, and I'm going to tell it to gain an IP address from the DHCP server. But before I do that, I'll show you where the leases are stored on this computer, on this server. So if I open up a text editor, gedit, go into the file system, and I find the var, the variables folder. Notice that in here there's quite a number of other folders. One of them is logs, so all the log files are recorded here. All kinds of variable system data are recorded in this particular directory. But the one I need here is lib, and then I need to then find DHCP3. And the file I'm looking for is DHCPD leases. Okay, it's important we get the right file because there's a DH client leases. This is for the client process that runs on this computer. So if this client were to be a DHCP client, it would record its lease information in that file. At the moment, we're only interested in this computer acting as a server, so we look at the DHCP daemon leases file. Open up there, and we'll see that file is currently empty, in that it has not issued any leases to any computers. So if we now go back to our client computer here, the one without the IP address, and we issue the command dhclient. Now, dhclient will communicate with the dhclient daemon running on this computer, and that is the DHCP client process, and that's the one that requests the IP address from the server. Now, if we just run it as a normal user, you'll find that we actually get all kinds of error messages popping up, because we're not permitted to make changes to network configuration as a standard user for security purposes. So what we need to do is issue sudo dhclient. And now if you notice, something different has happened. It's sending messages out of the networking interfaces, and it's broadcast to DHCP discover. It's then discovered a client, and that client has offered it an IP address of 10.1.1.10, and that is the current IP address of the DHCP server that sent that offer. Upon receiving that offer, the client has then said, okay, I would like to use that IP address, so it's issued a DHCP request, and the server has then acknowledged that request and said, yes, I've reserved that IP address for you, and it's been bound to that for this particular period of time. So this is the current time before it needs renewing. So that's what the IP address it's asked for. Let's just confirm it's definitely got that now by issuing ifconfig. And you'll notice now that the ETH1 network interface has a 10.1.1.10 IP address, which is what it's gained from the server, and it's also gained some other information here from that DHCP server, such as a broadcast address and a subnet mask. Now, if I wanted to look at the full details of the information it's gained from that DHCP server, if I go into Applications and open up gedit, remember that I'm still on the client here, I'm not on the server, so I go into File System, and if I then go to var lib DHCP3, notice there is no DHCPD leases here because this is not a server, it's only a client. But if I open up the leases file, you'll see here that we've got a particular lease and all that information here. So 10.1.1.10 is the IP address. Here's some routers. This is the lease time. That's where it got it. That's the DNS server. That's the DHCP server that it got the address from. That is our domain name. And here we have some information about when to renew, how long the lease is going to last for as well. So if we close down that there, and then we toggle back over to our server. So notice the file's still displayed on the screen. It hasn't updated. We'll need to reopen the file. And it says it needs to be reloaded. So here we go. We can now find that it has issued a lease. Okay, and here is the lease that it's issued. There we go. So it's issued that lease. What client has it sent it to? Well, that is the MAC address of the client. So if we just go back to our computer over here, and that should correspond to that MAC address there. And it does seem to, so that's looking good. So we can now identify that that has been issued to that client. Now, what happens if we want to renew or, in fact, remove the IP address from the client? So if we go back over from our server to our client again, and to essentially release the IP address and give it back to the server, we do sudo dhclient-r for release. And if you look now, it's issued a DHCP release message back to the server. If we do an ifconfig, we notice now it no longer has that IP address. If we toggle back to the server and we open this file again and we click on reload, notice here that this has now been released. Okay, the binding state is free. This IP address is now free. Okay, previously the binding state was active. So that's now telling us we've released that IP address back to the server. If we were to have a look again on the server about in the system log to see what's going on, so if we go into administration, we then go into log file viewer, and we were to scroll down and into syslog, scroll right the way to the very, very bottom. Notice here that we've got all kinds of information logged to the system log file saying that we've made a release, a request, an acknowledge, discover, offer, and then finally a release. So all that information is also written to a log file so that we can find out where any problems are occurring, if they are indeed occurring at all. So that really is just a basic overview of running through checking that a client can gain an IP address from a Linux DHCP server, how to release that IP address back again, and then locating the various files where that information is stored both on the server and on the client.